to you. Are you ready?
No, I should have. While you're talking, I'll have to leave. No, I'm just kidding.
Hello, everyone. Today is March 5th, 2024. My guests today are Liron Shalom, client marketing specialist for SurfPro, and Bruce Rosenblatt, president of Rarefied. Thanks for coming on the podcast.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And by the way, it's Liron Shalom Hickey.
Liron Shalom Hickey.
I'm sure
yes.
my husband will hear it and say, "Hey, what about my last name?"
Oh yes, it's not on the chat, and that's why I didn't.
No, that's okay.
So, yes, but Hickey.
Yeah. So Liron Shalom Hickey and SurfPro Sorrento Valley. That's also very important to say.
SurfPro Sorrento Valley. Yes, because SurfPro is a large company.
Exactly. We are nationwide. There are so many SurfPro locations in San Diego. Each one of them is independently owned and operated. We are really big and known in San Diego in the property management industry. Just really knowledgeable when it comes to how we handle things. And we service all San Diego County. That's something that I say often, because when you hear SurfPro Sorrento Valley, you think, oh, just this area. No, that's just our name and how we're known for. But we service all San Diego County. So.
Okay. And when you service all San Diego County, what services are you providing?
So SurfPro Sorrento Valley is basically your full service one-stop shop for any of your water, fire, and biohazard emergency. We take care of anything to do with like water, fire, and blood. That's pretty much, we're certified for it. We follow the highest industry standards. We all certified by the IICRC, which stands for the Institute of Inspection, Cleaning, and Restoration Certification. And it's important to say, because there are so many restoration companies out there. Some of them are not certified. Some of them, they follow different guidance. But we have really high standards when it comes to how we take care of things.
Okay. And Bruce, what is Rarefied?
So, Rarefied Air Environmental, we're an environmental consulting company and an environmental testing company and an environmental company that owns their own laboratory. So, what we do is we test for asbestos, lead, mold, bacteria, water quality, illicit drugs. Basically, we test for almost any element that you know of. If you want it tested, we can pretty much test for. So in the HOA field, it would be probably asbestos and lead, mold, and bacteria. These are the things most people, want to identify in the HOA spectrum. And so that's kind of what we do and what we specialize in. We specialize in their getting the results fast, so that the roan can get in there and do her job, because nothing happens until a test is done first. So by law, in the city and county of San Diego, Inland Empire, and of course all the way up the coast, you have to test if there's more than 4 units in San Diego for asbestos.
And how often does that testing need to take place?
So every time someone has a loss, they have to test, unless they want it to be assumed positive for asbestos. And so you could have several tests over the lifetime of a unit. So if you're in a condo and you have a unit that floods in the kitchen, you have to test the kitchen. But 5 years later, it may flood in the master bedroom, bathroom. Therefore, we have to come back and test again. So the areas that the restoration company will be working in, like Liron, would have to be tested before they can start cutting the drywall, because that's where the asbestos lies, in the drywall joint compound and texture coating. Other places also, Kourosh, but
Mhm.
basically drywall is the big factor for
Yeah.
condominiums.
Let me also elaborate, if I may. The only time we probably wouldn't need to test, that's in the best case scenario. Let's say you have, with water damage, you have different water contamination, different categories. Are you familiar with that, Kourosh?
Yes.
We have three different categories. Category one will be clean water, which means consider best case scenario. Even though there is no such thing, water loss, which is a good thing, right? But in this case, that means that the water is clean and maybe we are able to dry the structure in place. So we don't need to disturb any material. We don't need to cut the drywall. In this case, we're not going to need to test for asbestos. But
What is a good example of that type of water?
let's say, water that come from like a drinking water, right? Like maybe water that is from a supply line, that's, so that will be a case of clean water. But again, it's really hard to say because it's also depending on what the water went through and how long it's been, because category one can become category two and sometimes three, depending on how fast you take care of the loss. And also if the water was clean but now went through, let's say you have a house that maybe you have like, you know pets feces on the floor, or like there was pee or anything like that, and now the clean water went through that, now it's not clean anymore. That
So
makes sense.
depending on how that water has gotten to where it is, that will
Correct.
change. Even if at the source it was one category of water, by
Yep,
the time it's where it needs to be, where restoration needs to come in, it could be a different category.
exactly. So for
Exactly.
example, the way I like to explain it so it's easy for people to kind of like imagine, the water you drink will be clean, right? But if you wash your like, you wash your hands, right? You wash it with soap, you had like germs and dirt on your hands. Now this water will be category two, right? Because it's not anymore, you wouldn't drink that water, right? It has chemicals and dirt inside. That will be your category two. And category three is basically the worst case scenario. That will be your like backup, sewage, like very grossly contaminated.
Okay.
That's like anything that this water touched or anything like that will have to be disposed.
Okay. And depending on the different category of water that's being dealt with, the protocols and the process for restoration are very different.
You nailed it. Yep, pretty much. The nice thing is that when Bruce and I we go and we teach, we kind of give our clients hope and we let them know, hey, the good thing about water damage is that it doesn't matter the different scenarios, right? You can have water damage from the roof, you can have water damage from the dishwasher, you can have water damage from a slab leak, water heater, but the steps are the same steps how to handle that. But yeah, the actual process can be a little bit different. If we need to cut the drywall or not, and if there is mold or not. So that's, yes, the process is different, but the steps are the same. If that makes sense. So we can even talk about the steps. So
Please.
to clarify.
Yes. Could you speak about the
Yes,
steps?
yeah, absolutely. So since we kind of, I've mentioned like different scenarios. So I always ask, what is the first thing you want to do when you have a leak, right? You have water damage. Now, you are an HOA manager, which is wonderful. Are you on site when you manage your properties? Are you on site in all of them, or are you managing them from far?
Some of them were managing from far.
From far, okay. So when you actually get a loss, or you get an email or a phone call from one of your residents, they usually report that also from far. You're not go and see yourself. And
Well, it
correct?
depends on the situation, but usually not myself.
Yeah. So the thing is that, we can't expect really resident to be the expert. So a lot of time provide us a report that is not really always accurate. They will tell you, oh, I have a roof leak, but then, you end up finding out it was a pipe. So the nice thing is that we are able to help our clients by sending our team and help them determine the source. So the first thing you want to do when you have water damage is you want to fix the source, right? It's kind of like when you're bleeding, what do you want to do when you're bleeding? You want to stop the bleeding.
That makes
right?
sense.
That makes sense. So we want to stop the bleeding. We want to fix the source. And fixing the source will help us with many different things. I can speak for HOA, for example. So with homeowner association, sometimes the homeowner will be responsible and sometimes the HOA will be responsible. So by finding the source, it will help us finding out who is the responsible party. So let's say we found out is a common pipe, that most likely will be an HOA. But again, it's depending on the CCNRs, right? So the first step, fix the source. Another things that will help us is we will know the category of loss. If it's clean, right? If it's gray or if it's grossly contaminated. That will help us also determine the continuous, the process and the extent of the work. And if we need rarefied air environmental later on to test for asbestos. So, and again, the first step, find the source and fix it. Another thing before I go move on to the second, it's kind of will help us determine if it's going to be a cover claim or not.
And what do you mean by cover claim?
Cover claim mean that if, sometime people want to file a claim with their insurance to see if their insurance will cover and pay to fix the damages, we will know if it's a cover claim because if it's a sudden, most insurance, again, every insurance is different and every policy is different. So depending of your insurance policy, but most insurance companies will not cover mold, for example. So if we go and we find mold, we know it's been going on for a while. So there would be like, well, no, because they want to know you did your due diligence as the resident or as the HOA manager to fix the source and fix the issue as quick as possible. If you don't do it quick, that means more damages. So they wouldn't want to cover something like that.
And I think actually part of the policy is an expectation that you as the homeowner would take on that responsibility of reporting those damages as soon as possible.
Yep, absolutely. Yeah. So that's like the one thing that we want to do. So that's the first step out of the 5. So first step, fix the source. There is really no point of us starting to dry and extracting water if the leak is still active, right?
No.
So that's the first thing we want to do. And then the second thing is really, if you have standing water, you definitely don't want the water to keep traveling into different areas, create more and more damages. So you want to extract the water, and we like it the way we like to call it in the restoration terms, in stabilizing the area, meaning we're going to stop further damages by setting up equipment, right? That will be your DUs, your fans. We'll stop further damages, and at this point, we will know if we need to test for asbestos. We will know if the third step will be, okay, looks like in this loss, we will need to remove all this drywall. This drywall is way too saturated, too wet. We're not going to be able to dry in place. And besides, it's not even clean water. We need to get rarefied air environmental already scheduled and get the ball rolling, because it's going to take them some time to come back to us with the results.
And when we say we need to test for asbestos, Bruce, what is asbestos?
So asbestos is actually the state rock of California. How about that? People are always stunned to hear that. But asbestos was used in the 50s, 60s, 70s, 80s, and sometimes even now in building materials so that fires wouldn't spread from room to room. So what happened was throughout all these years, the building inspection department wanted contractors to use asbestos in building materials so things would be fireproof. And it's really that simple. But asbestos is a rock. They find it all over the United States, out in the desert, especially. They grind it up. And what happens is they use it in building products so that things won't burn. The problem with asbestos is they found out years ago that people that were exposed to asbestos were starting to die of a lung cancer, but a lung cancer that was only caused by asbestos, and that's called mesothelioma. And you hear it time and time again, mesothelioma. Um, People are dying of it. Goldwater and Goldwater, all these companies that advertise. They used to be late night TV, but now they're on all the time. The Meso book, and these are people that are exposed to asbestos and get that cancer and die of mesothelioma. About 27,000 people a year die from mesothelioma, so it's a real thing. It takes 20 to 30 years to metastasize in your system. So it's a long game. It doesn't happen overnight. So you don't know, Kourosh, like when you've been exposed, when exactly that's going to happen. So it does take time. The latency period is between 20 and 30 years. So that's what asbestos is. It comes in a lot of products. Let's say in a condominium, you may have it in your drywall. You may have it in your joint compound and texture coating of the drywall. You may have it in popcorn ceilings, which are acoustical ceilings in the higher concentrations. You have it in HVAC systems where they used it for insulations in the HVAC plumbing. You have it in regular plumbing and transite pipe, maybe from a water heater that may be in a condominium, and the pipe looks kind of white, kind of clay looking, round pipe, but actually that's pure asbestos. You see asbestos in the linoleum flooring, 9 by 9 and 12 by 12 Armstrong flooring. And you see asbestos in slip vinyl flooring, kind of the vinyl flooring your grandma had with daisies on it in the kitchen or something like that. That's high concentrations of asbestos. You also find asbestos in gluing materials called mastic. And sometimes they even used mastic that has 8 to 12% asbestos in it on the flooring in even ceramic tiles. Sometimes they put down ceramic tiles, which has no asbestos, but then underneath that, you'll see tiles that have black mastic behind them. And you'll see black mastic used in also office settings where they use that rubberized molding that you see around office buildings on the floor. The really old ones have black mastic. And you see black mastic also when people put up mirrors years ago. They used the mastic, and actually behind the mirror, there's a ton of asbestos in the black mastic that they use to adhere the mirrors. So it comes in many different shapes and forms. You find it on roofs that are done a year ago because the mastic that's used for the roof jacks where the plumbing comes through the roof would have black mastic on it. Like even today, you can go into Home Depot or Lowe's and buy Henry's Wet Patch. And today you can buy it, and the first ingredient is asbestos. So unfortunately, they still produce asbestos. I can't talk today. Products in the United States, and these products have asbestos in them currently. So that's what asbestos is. That's how it manifests itself into the condominium complexes that were built a lot of times in the 50s, 60s, 70s, 80s, even 90s. And it is an issue. It's a real issue, and people have to understand it's really important. to test for it for their health. Kourosh, when you start tearing down walls and cutting walls, that's where you get the problem. You're fine living in a house or a condo with asbestos in it as long as you don't disturb the
Yep.
asbestos containing materials. If you don't disturb them, you can live there 100 years and be great and fine and nothing happens. But when
Mhm.
these materials become friable, you take that material, you put it between your hands, you go like this, that material mists into the air and you can breathe it. That's when the whole problem happens. And that's why we ask plumbers and restoration companies and electricians and
Yeah.
all these workers on
Roofers.
your units, roofers, you got to test for asbestos first. You don't want to kill the clients, the homeowners, their children. You don't want to kill your workers. You got to
Yeah.
be careful with what your workers are inhaling. So all these things are important to test for asbestos.
Wow.
Yeah. Bruce knows one thing or two
Yes.
I
about
know a few things.
asbestos.
Maybe more.
He's very passionate about that.
Very
As you can
passionate.
see. Yeah.
Done well over a
Yeah. But
100,000
yeah.
jobs.
But
So
I'm
I've seen it
glad.
all.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I'm,
Wow.
I've seen it all.
I'm glad you did say it because I actually just got a call, I think the other day, like 2 days ago. One of our clients with, doesn't matter which company, but she did call me and she said that she has asbestos all over, she has the popcorn ceiling and she's like, do I need to remove it? I said, no, you don't need to remove it. If, you can live in it. The only time you need to remove it by law, you have to dispose it by a licensed contractor is if you're going to disturb it. So yeah, that's a really good point.
That's a
and-
very good point.
Yeah, and that's only the third step out of the 5.
Yes. Wow.
So
We
so
haven't
what?
even gotten. And I actually had a question about
Yeah.
number 2. I think when you mentioned that you put fences and you stop
Yeah.
the leakage, what does that
What
process?
does that mean? Yeah,
Well, yes.
that's actually a really good question because it's like, explain to me, what does that mean? What do you mean stabilizing? So we don't want any humidity, right? To be like, we don't want the air to be stagnant, right? We want to make sure that we have like the fans that move the air, right, from preventing from the air to be stagnant. Because what happened, that's when it's like creating mold. In order to start, needs moisture and humidity. So when you have that, that's where you start seeing the growth and the mold. And that's what we want to prevent. We want that. When we say further damages, we usually refer to, it's wet right now, but we don't want to have mold, right? Because when you have mold, that's more extent, like that's more of a work to try and remediate that. So that's what it means. You have the fan that will move the air, and you have the DUs that basically, the DU, if you ever seen the dehumidifier, it's like a very heavy machine, and they have like the hose in the back that you could see the liquid basically all collecting, all basically, if you can only envision that in your mind, you have like humidity in the air, you have the water, so it's like literally taking that, making it back into liquid and collecting it. And so the combination of the dehumidifier work, which creating also a lot of heat. People always call me, is that normal? It's like really, really hot. Yeah, that's the process. That's will create basically with the air and humidity to get it back to a liquid. And that's how it's collecting all of it. That's sometimes we need to have a bucket to collect all these liquid and with the air together. So if you only put fans, you're probably not going to dry the structure. If you only put DUs, it's not going to, you may be going to have other issues later on. So you have to have both together. And that's meaning stabilizing, like keep it stabilized, keep it, trying to find another word, Brucey. What will be another word for stabilizing? Like,
Well, you want to, what Liron was explaining is that dehumidifier has a refrigeration coil in it. And that
yeah,
refrigeration coil takes the air, the
mhm,
ambient air, pulls the humidity out and turns it to water. So
yep,
what Liron likes to do, she likes to stabilize. I still love that word.
I know.
She's
Yes, me too.
stabilizing. There's no better word for it.
Yeah,
She really is not. She's stabilizing the situation so that we get, she gets in there, they get the water out. As soon as they vacuum all the water out
yep,
and they get that done, they set their equipment and then they stop. And I think that's an important point
yep,
because I've seen restoration companies come in there and then all of a sudden they're cutting
yep,
and there might be some things on the walls, especially wallpaper, maybe in a high-rise condo that's in a hallway
yep,
where it's a grass cloth that came from Cambodia in 1982. They don't make that grass cloth anymore, and you're cutting all the areas in a high-rise or mid-rise condo in the hallway or a public area, or you
yeah,
guys like to say common area. So it's really, really important to get the place stabilized that's
yeah,
flooded, get it tested. Nobody can tell where we test it from. When we test, we don't take a melon scooper and test it out of the middle of the wall. We test it behind the electrical outlets and the light switches. That's how we do it. So you can't even tell we've been in your condo testing. So
exactly.
once that's done, then Larone will go to her other step right now and explain to you what she does next.
Yeah,
And so that was something you mentioned that ServPro Sorrento Valley differentiates themselves from some of the other water restoration companies is that they're testing for asbestos and having you rarefied air environmental come in and test before you know cutting
yeah,
into the infrastructure, and that's
yeah.
a big
Right,
deal.
right.
We're
That
following
is a big
industry
deal.
standards. Yeah,
Yeah, so most restoration companies, in fact, all I deal with do test
yeah,
because they know APCD Rule 1206. They have to test, and the fine is if they don't test is
yep,
between $50,000 and $1 million, depending on
Wow.
occurrence.
yep,
Yeah, so Kourosh, it's a big fine. So you kind of don't want to get caught without having a survey and testing done. Otherwise, a restoration company is going to be in big trouble. And
yep,
so restoration companies understand that, and they usually abide. It's other companies, the GCs and other
try
companies
to
that,
cut corners.
yeah, and they don't test, and then they tear
Yeah,
everything down, and
and
now all of a
they're,
sudden
yeah, and also
there's
they
a
kind of,
problem.
mm-hmm,
There's a big problem. We're
or
doing an emergency asbestos cleanup plan, which we do one every day. And that means somebody didn't order testing. We're coming in, we're seeing how polluted the condo is.
yep,
And now it's a very expensive proposition to clean up that condo that's been contaminated by asbestos. Somewhere between 50,000 and hundreds of thousands of dollars because people's contents gets polluted, people's ownership of all their things inside their house get
yep,
asbestos on them, and a lot of times you can't get asbestos out of certain articles, and that goes for furniture that's
yep,
padded, that has fabric on it. Things like this cannot be wiped down and saved. Everything has to be trashed. All the appliances have to go. The HVAC system has to be pulled out. So it's a very serious thing for $395. Doesn't make
Wow.
sense. That's what I charge. So it doesn't make sense.
yeah. We basically, bottom line, we really want to do everything the right way to make sure that everybody is like safe, like health wise, but also liability. Because, they say we want to make sure that no one is like going to be subject to any lawsuit. Uh, for example, for the HOA world, it's like, we want to cover the community manager, property management, as well as the board.
Yes.
It's a liability issue. That's what it all comes down to.
Yeah.
I'm the board and the property manager's doctor. I protect them and liability from lawsuits. Best way you can do that, test first.
Mhm. Yep.
That makes
Um,
sense.
yeah.
And so, boards themselves may want to cut corners and not take on those expenses, but again, they don't want to be held liable for something,
Right.
by a resident who gets sick or
Yeah.
any reason.
And
Right.
we will advise if it's not needed. We don't want to do, and I think that's what I feel like makes us stand out, is because we don't want to do more than what's needed or less. You want to be accurate. That's how we build good reputation. That's how we became a preferred vendor with insurance companies, because we do what's needed. And I mean, that's really help at the end with for everybody, with accuracy. As far as like asbestos, we have situation where we can skip it, and that's when, if we know the property will always come back positive for
Right.
asbestos.
Assume that it's positive. Save the money. Don't need me. I'm fine with it. I'm busy as I am. So when they assume it's positive, they go right to abatement,
Yep, we're still doing
which
it
is
the right way.
removing it. Right. You're still doing it the right way. You move straight to abatement and you have the place abated and you save time and money on that job by moving it forward faster.
Yep.
Okay.
So yeah, so I always tell our clients, if you have the 3 steps in place, you're good. So and yeah, stabilizing is a great word, because it's kind of like having a patient go to the hospital in a critical condition. They're bleeding, they're going into the hospital. The doctor stopped the bleeding, cleaned the area, and now the patient is stabilized. So it's the same with water damage. We have these 3 steps in place. We're good to go. Now we can breathe. We know we're not going to have any further damages. And then you have the 4th and the 5th are the easiest. That's when usually you will get basically our recommendation as to what needs to be done to finish the dry out properly. This is
Okay.
all we need to do. And then usually step 4 is when you want to, review the steps, the process, and figure out if you need to file a claim. So if I'm providing you the recommendation, and let's say I'm telling you, Kourosh, it's probably going to be $800 for the dry out. I'm just throwing a number, but you have a $2,500 deductible. That's like insurance, right? For the insurance, you're like, oh, well, I'm going to have to pay 2,500 deductible, which is more than what it's going to take to dry. So there is really no need to file a claim, right?
Yeah.
So
Why? Why? Makes no sense.
yeah.
And then the insurance company is inevitably going to tell you when you file 1 or 2 claims, hey, any more claims, we're going to cancel you.
Mhm. So yeah, that's steps 4, sorry. And then step 5 is, once we are done with the dry out, now we are ready to scope for the repairs, put it back in place. And that's something Surfer Sorrento Valley can do as well. Like I said, we're a one-stop shop. So we have our construction and repair division in-house, and we can assist in getting it back to pre-loss condition as well.
Okay. And what do you usually see before that step takes place, before they get back to, after the dry out?
Yeah. What do I see as far as like
Or
to
what can unit owners or homeowners usually expect? Is it, what type of damage is it?
Yeah. Well, that's a good question. It's also really depending on the area. Like if it's happened in the kitchen, you're probably looking at, like, if we had to remove the cabinets, if you had to remove the baseboards. Usually with homeowner association, you also have a bare wall policy. You're probably familiar with that. So that's mean, or walls in, meaning that the HOA will cover everything. Will put you back to pre-loss condition. You don't need to pay nothing for the repairs. But if you have a bare wall policy in your homeowner association, you're looking at least you will have the homeowner portion, which will usually pay for the painting, for the baseboard, for the flooring, if we had to remove it. But again, every job is different, a different scope of work. But definitely at a minimum, you're looking at fixing the drywall, the texture, putting back the texture, the paint. That's at a minimum. Does that make sense?
That makes sense. Okay. And
Yep.
then that would be for, the kitchen or anywhere,
Yep.
like the living room.
Yep. I mean, we can take care of everything. We have homes that unfortunately really got affected like 60% or 70%. And sometimes we need to remodel the whole unit. Like in this case, they most likely will file a claim if their unit was affected that bad. And the insurance will basically also cover just without upgrades, as well as the board member and HOA. Usually they're not going to cover any upgrades. They're just going to cover to the original. And then if the homeowner choose to make any upgrades, then they can pay the difference.
Yeah. Okay. That makes
Yep.
sense.
Mhm.
And so
So that's pretty much our steps. That's
Okay.
That's what we do.
And so, Sorrento Valley is a city in San Diego and Southern California. All of California
Yep.
this winter has, been heavy, a lot of downpour.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
So
Mhm.
Yeah, just like last year.
it was
Yes.
similar last year, the types,
Yeah.
and
And yeah, and you can only imagine with like I said, when there is a will, there is a way. We always tell our clients, we will never be too busy for you. So you can only imagine when it's raining and how slammed we are. And my thing is that if you call me, when you call me for any loss, you will feel like you're the only one who called me today. You will never know or feel that I have probably 50 other calls. The same with Bruce. We want to make sure we really focus on the person, and every loss is, we give it the attention and the priority that it takes and the sense of urgency. That's the one thing that, like I said, I think we were chatting before we started the podcast that I have the military background. I'm very I'm on a mission. You call me, I want to make sure I execute whatever task you gave me. And I am very passionate about it. And I think the clients, when they call us, they do feel it, how we get it done for them. And we follow up with them. We're not waiting them to follow up with us. I mean, obviously, we're not perfect. Sometimes it's going to happen when we're so busy, but we really, really thrive to provide exceptional service. And I tell my team all the time, I don't want to provide good. I want exceptional. That's the
Yes.
difference, right? Like good, we'll see. Like, let's say we get an email from a client and they're asking to talk to the project manager. We can say, thank you so much for reaching out to us. Here is Oscar's phone number. If you have any questions, you can reach out to him. But that's not enough. Better is to say, thank you for reaching out to us. We will ensure Oscar calls you, right?
that's very big.
That's the difference. We don't want them chasing us. What do you need? We'll come to you and we'll get it done, right? So it's really, really, there is a difference. Like I am a little bit picky because I feel like also the way we communicate is mainly via emails, and tone is so important. Like if someone say, well, thank you so much for scheduling it so quickly, we could say, no problem, but it is a negative word, right? So I like to see our team say, you got it, our pleasure. It's more positive, right? So everything counts, right? And
Yes.
if you serve in the military, like they teach you that the smallest things are can be the most important thing. If you miss on the small things, you're going to miss on the big things. So it's important, like the way we communicate, what we choose to say, everything makes a huge difference. And our
Huge.
clients can feel it, they can sense it, the energy through the emails too. You got it. We'll take care of it ASAP. We'll keep you posted. Like there is always the reassurance that we got them. And that's why I sent you the video for Surfer Sorrento Valley, the new one, that I said, they know we got them 1000%.
And we'll link to that video in the show notes.
Yeah.
And that's a very important, point, because especially if someone's calling water restoration, they want someone, or even fire restoration for your other portion of your business, and especially blood or any sort of other type of restoration. Maybe you could speak about that briefly. But they're not in an easy place at that moment, and they don't want to continue to be reaching out to someone and just having to deal with, for people in our case, we try and get the problem resolved as soon as possible. You don't want to be continuing to talk to the HOA manager, or talking to an email that's not being responded to, or reaching a phone number that's not being answered. You want, these are big moments in your life that really take a toll. So you want quick service.
Exactly. That's why
and someone that executes on the small things.
Exactly. And that's why I'm beyond proud and excited that we have our email policy in place. And that's like literally not just like email etiquette, but also how fast we need to respond to things. It's literally within our email policy.
Can you speak about your email policy?
Yeah, we have, I will just talk about, we have a lot of different things inside this email policy, but the most important thing is that when we get a loss, we have up to 5 to 10 minutes to take an action. And that's like really raising the bar in the industry. I'm sure Bruce could probably speak to that as well. Rarefied Air Environmental is the same way. And I think our clients know too that I will only refer the best of the best for them, because it's a reflection of me. And that's one of the reasons that I'm very proud of also Rarefied Air Environmental. They're very quick, very responsive. Everything is documented, communicating clearly, and it's a key. I always say, respond, communicate, deliver. If you do these three things in every business, you will be successful.
Right.
Period.
Right. Everything has
easy.
a sense of urgency.
Easy. Just do it.
Respond, communicate, deliver.
100%. And part of communication is documentation. When you communicate, you document everything. So if you called me, Kourosh, God forbid you had a loss, you called me, Liron, I have an emergency, everything we talked about will be summarized and will be sent to you by email.
That's a very important.
And that's part. Yes. Yeah, Kourosh, because of insurance. You know that as a manager.
For an insurance, and then for even, later down the line, it's when a board member leaves, it's documentation, and is a big deal.
Yeah, she said, oh, Liron, I wanted you to go to inspect why your team stabilize and set up equipment. I didn't approve that. Everything is documented. Thank you so much, Kourosh, for reaching out to me today. It was great speaking to you. Per our conversation, you would like us to go and assess and inspect. That means that we're not going to start any work. We're just going to go and take a look. So everything.
What does that cost? What does that cost?
Free.
Free.
We waive any inspection fees.
Free. Right.
Yeah. So if any homeowner in San Diego, Liron, where is Servpro Sorrento serving?
Basically all San Diego County.
So if
anywhere
anyone
in San Diego,
San Diego County needs an assessment, please don't hesitate to reach out to Servpro Sorrento Valley. Even though the title says Sorrento Valley serving all San Diego County.
Yep. And rarefied air, I believe, is serving outside. Right.
I do all of San Diego City, County, and Inland Empire.
Oh, okay. That's awesome.
Okay. And rarefied available to San Diego, Inland Empire, and what was the third one?
Well, I said San Diego City, County, Inland
Okay.
Empire, actually all the way up to Lake Elsinore. That's
All the
as
way
far
up
as
to
we
Lake
service.
Elsinore.
Yeah, for Inland Empire.
So, free assessment from ServPro Sorrento Valley if you feel there might be a need
Yeah.
for restoration.
If you see, people will ask, oh, what does that mean? Like if I have a concern, if you see moisture, if you see stain, you think it's maybe water damage. Like yesterday I got an email and they sent me a picture. Looks like it's already dry, but it's like still a stain. And they do actually have asbestos in this, and they wanted to repair. So they already like, we know we have asbestos. Please coordinate to remove the asbestos. So yeah, if you have any stain, if you see looks like growth, like you think maybe you have mold, anything like that, and as well as we didn't really talked about it as much, but yes, we do fire, smoke, even odor removal, and blood crime scene cleanup.
Okay.
Yeah.
And
yeah.
Bruce, you briefly spoke about it. I think there's kind of a myth going that a lot of people hold that if a building was built after 1978 and there's water damage there, then it's not going to have asbestos in it because it was created after 1978. Can you speak towards that?
So let's talk about that. So they outlawed asbestos, kind of, not really outlawed it, but stopped production of it in 1978. That's when the rule came down. In the infinite wisdom of the government, they also gave many years to the contractors to use up the rest of the asbestos that they had in their warehouses. So they had many years to use that up. They didn't just say stop using it in 78. They just stopped ordering it in 78 and producing the asbestos materials. But they had many, many years where they could continue to use up all that material in their warehouse. That's number one. So it's important to understand that asbestos appears again in all of the 1980s. I've seen it in houses in the year 2000s. I've seen it in mid-rises and high-rises last month. So, that are built literally this year because the mastic around the roof jacks on the roofs had asbestos in it because they still tend to use these products that still have asbestos produced to this day in the United States. Also, it's really important to understand we have a very porous border, and that's the reason for these laws. And I'm talking about Mexico. So the workers come up from Mexico, they have drywall joint compound, texture coating, all these things that they're being supplied in Mexico at a cheaper rate. But in Mexico, they have no laws on asbestos. So these products they're buying have asbestos in them in Mexico. They bring them up in their trucks when they come to work, and they use them concurrently with the construction that they're doing now, today, let's say. And so you get asbestos pop up almost no matter what year you're out testing, because sometimes they get the supplies from Mexico, bring them up here and use those cheaper supplies, which may have asbestos in them, and a lot of times do have asbestos contained in them. So that's where we get into this problem. Some of it's porous border, some of it is because they still produce a mastic with asbestos in it. But we'll get asbestos showing up, in later years, and people are shocked, but it's because of sometimes the border and sometimes the product is still being made with asbestos in it.
Okay. And then, Bruce, just for San Diego's listening in, that's a piece of expertise, that was a good piece of expertise that, San Diego County, Inland Empire, homes in these areas, that even puts us more at a likelihood of having asbestos in our homes, regardless
Exactly,
of the year.
exactly. And don't forget, we have lead involved. So lead, you have to test, which is in tiles and your surrounds behind the shower, tiles on countertops, flooring tiles, all these ceramic tiles, they have lead in them. These tiles need to be tested 1978 in the state of California, except for San Diego City. San Diego City is 1 year stricter. 1979 is when lead needs to be tested. But we have houses that get all their lead, they get their tiles from Mexico. In Mexico, they currently make tiles that are bright colored, beautiful Mexican tile. You'll see them on floors, you'll see them in kitchens areas, you'll see them in brand new homes in Rancho Santa Fe. The problem is there's a ton of lead in those tiles because they glaze them with lead, and that's how they get those bright colors out.
Wow.
And so those are in houses that they're building now. So you got to be real careful before you start, you start removing tiles, countertops, floorings, things like that, because there's a lot of lead in there. Now, lead's probably not going to kill you, but if you're a child and you have brain development, that's what we've seen in like Flint, Michigan. Have you seen, with the water they're talking about and all the lead poisoning that's happened to children? And that can actually affect their IQ or their brain development. So as their brain develops, they're ingesting lead at high levels, then lead can get into their system and actually affect their brain development and IQ development. So that's a super important thing. I mean, we got to be cognizant of the fact that there are lead laws in San Diego, and those laws are taken up by health departments and local construction permits and things like that. So it's really, really important to be cognizant of both asbestos and lead, especially in condominiums.
That's a great point, Bruce. And many homeowners or property owners in San Diego and Inland Empire, they might go with a GC general contractor that maybe gets their supply from Mexico, and maybe
Right.
Yep.
has for any reason because it's a lot cheaper, I would guess. But
I would think, yeah, probably true.
um, that's just something for locals or San Diegans to be aware of. People in the Inland Empire, Southern California in general, to be aware of that. You don't want to go necessarily with the cheapest route on. Really, you have a general contractor come in, you've had some water damage, you might have asbestos and no water damage, and you just do some sort of work or modification on the property, and then you might release asbestos, and you also might have some asbestos being placed in there since these products are not from the United States, they're from Mexico.
Exactly. And we see that with people that don't, general contractors that aren't on board, or different people in the contracting of your house that start to rip into tile or flooring, vinyl flooring, or walls or acousticals. And what happens is, like I say, there's almost no day that passes by where we're not doing an emergency asbestos cleanup plan, where we're taking samples of vacuum samples, and we're seeing how many rooms are polluted from the removal of a wall, flooring, and then we're having to write a report, which is almost never good news for the homeowner. It's very bad news. And remember, your HO6, HO5 policies for condos do not cover asbestos. Asbestos is not covered. GCs aren't covered. Nobody is. It's been an exclusion on policies for 20 years. So this is coming out of their pocket. These people have to pay for it out of their pocket. The HOA board has to pay out of their pocket. This is not something that's covered by insurance. It will be denied immediately.
That's a big deal for people wanting to, that's huge liability. And I think we've been speaking about liability this entire podcast.
Exactly.
So it's something to keep in mind. There was something that you mentioned
Yep.
there that I kind of forgot. Liron, is there anything you'd like to say?
No, the only thing I would say is just do it right first time. That's all I will say.
Call
I
Surf
mean,
Pro
that's
Sorrento Valley.
pretty much, my dad taught me that when I was a child. Like, you try to cut corner, you're gonna pay later. So just do it right first time. Um,
And you
rely on your,
said
yeah, rely
only
on your experts.
$395, Bruce?
Correct. Yeah, lead testing's $395. You know,
Okay.
it's just so important. We didn't talk about mold, but if you have a flood
Yep.
and you let it sit there, and you let it sit there and you don't do anything about it, you say, well, I'll call the insurance company. Maybe, maybe not. I'm not going
Yeah.
to worry about it. Or we didn't know how wet it was or whatever. And we try to clean it up ourselves. So then the M word comes
Mhm.
because after a week or two, mold's going to start forming in the wet building materials. And then Kourosh, it's going to get ugly because now it's not just a dry out, because it's not so easy to dry out with mold there because you're going to cross contaminate all the contents
Yep.
of the condo or the house. So it's important, if you have a flood, call right away. Time is of the essence. Okay. It's super and super important to take it seriously.
Yeah.
If you have a flood, you need to call within 15 minutes, an
Yeah.
hour, no more than that.
And
As time passes, it just gets worse.
exactly. And just to piggyback on what Bruce is saying, you have up to a year to file a claim. If you call the insurance, they will ask you, well, why are you calling us? Call the company that can actually stop it, right? It's kind of like when, if you're bleeding, you run to the, the hospital.
Hospital.
You're not going to call your insurance and say, hey, I just fell from my roof. Is that going to be covered? Like, are you guys, no, like, go and take care of yourself first and then come to us. And if you go, and again, if you go to a certified and licensed expert, they will document everything so you can go back to your insurance and they can review everything that happened from start to finish without even needing to be there. They will be able to see everything like it's happened yesterday, even if you file 4 or 5 months later. So stop the bleeding, take care of it, and only then you can go and reach out to your insurance agent. That's what I would recommend.
Yeah, super important. Every HOA lawyer is going to tell you the same thing. Mitigate it first. Don't worry about filing a claim. You can file a claim soon, but you got to get in there. You got to mitigate it. In every single policy, there is a stipulation that you have to call in immediately. If you wait a long period of time, that stipulation is going to come and it's going to stab you in the back because the insurance company is going to say it's not covered. You waited too long. These things like mold forming and things like that, not covered. Mold has to be from a sudden loss, a pipe break, something like that, that washes out the condo immediately. Then it's covered. But if you wait weeks and you don't do anything about it, you don't call a restoration company, then what happens? Then you get all these secondary problems that won't be covered by your insurance. So it's so important to mitigate immediately as soon as the loss happens, no matter who's covering it. My neighbor upstairs didn't call. I don't care about your neighbor upstairs. I only care about my unit. You need to call immediately to file. Don't worry about the neighbor upstairs. You can call your insurance company and file later on. They can call theirs and then they'll subjugate and find out who pays what. But in the meantime, you got to call her immediately so that you get the system, the 5 layers of what she has started immediately so that
Yes.
further losses, Kourosh, don't happen. Otherwise, you get further damage.
And it's a huge, wherever that claim ends up going, whether it's still held in the owner's liability, whether it's the person upstairs, whether it's the
Right.
board, everyone, whoever's going to pay that needs insurance. They want that to be as low as possible, and the best thing for the homeowner to do, or whoever's facing that leak, those stains, that water, that flooding, whatever that may be, just calling, mitigating that as soon as possible is the best thing to do.
Absolutely. I hear all these, I get it all the time. I get a call from the person below. The person on top doesn't call me. They don't really notice it, that the toilet is leaking, the seal or something. And the homeowner below is saying, well, I got to find out from my HOA whether this is covered or not. Forget that. Forget that mentality. Get on the flood right away.
Yes.
Then figure that out. If you call your manager, your poor HOA manager, and you carry on, oh, the neighbor upstairs has to take care of it. In the meantime, you're going to have a lot of secondary damages that's not even going to be covered by the person upstairs, because you need to mitigate right away. So I tell people, don't even call your HOA manager. Call and get it mitigated, and then call the HOA manager, and they'll figure out, do the CC&Rs covered or not? Is it one pipe going to your place and it's the only pipe, so we're not covering it? Is it a pipe going to multiple units so that they're going to cover it? Look, I get it, but you've got to mitigate right away. Otherwise, it gets more and more expensive for you as a condo owner as time goes by.
And many people in San Diego right now, Inland Empire, are probably, facing these, water damages. Maybe they're small, maybe they're light, but we just had a few atmospheric rivers come through.
Right.
And so, with some pretty, at least for, heavy rains. And so if anyone's facing some damage, even if it seems minor, like it's not a big deal, it's just a small thing, call Serve Pro Sorrento Valley, call Rarefied Air Environmental, find out, whether find out if, get the assessment. And
immediately.
Yeah, when our clients call us, we will make all the other calls for them. So if they need a roofer, we'll call the roofer. We call the plumber. We'll call Rarefied Air Environmental. We'll call any expert that is needed to get the job done. We will make the phone calls. If you, as the HOA manager, if you have a preferred plumber, we will call your preferred plumber. We also don't want to step on anybody's toes. We want to make sure we work with you and your expert and your preferred vendors. So we'll make it easy. That's what we're here for. That's what we want to do. We want to make this disaster like it's never even happened.
Make it easy.
I know it sounds cheesy, but that's our slogan, and it's true. We will make it like it's never even happened.
And that's what people want.
Yeah. Yep. I had 5 leaks in my house. So I know, like, I'm sure everybody experienced leak in some point in their life. So it can be a pain in the butt. You just want to get back to normal. You want your beautiful home in place. And so that's what we, and you can only imagine, experience that like the night of Thanksgiving or Christmas Day. And
right.
So, we are 24/7. We're always available. We have our 24/7 emergency line, but I'm also available all the time. My cell phone is usually on the business card, and Bruce as well. So we're always available.
My guests today have been Liron Shalom Hickey and Bruce Rosenblatt. Thanks for coming on the podcast.
Thank you.
Thank you.